Hey everybody, Tomas, your tobacconist here at Ultimo Premium Cigars. Want to cover some cool information about pairing. In our last video, we went over the idea of the anatomy of taste and how that goes into the blending process. But today we're going to cover how we do pairing, how we're going to enjoy the flavor components of the cigar once a cigar is developed. Now, when we're talking about pairing, we look at contrasting pairing versus complementary pairing. Contrasting pairing is going to balance each other out. For example, sweet softens bitter, acid clears fat and cleans the palates. So in this case, we're going to look for how do we create balance between a heavy cigar or a light and creamy cigar or a acidic beverage versus a creamier cigar to coat the palate with more oils, so that way the acid has something to bind to. The opposite of that, we also have complementary pairings where we have more of the same. So for example, if we want to have more of a creaminess to the mouthfeel, where we have more oils in the cigar to complement the creaminess of a coffee, for example, that would be a complementary pairing. When we talked about flavor development and the science of flavor, we talk about the palate and the different 5 flavor elements that the palate perceives, which is salty, sweet, bitter and savory, umami, which is creamies and fats, and acid or sour, which is on the sides of the palate. So we're looking at those primary flavor components on the palate to create a tactile experience on the palate, to create more of a mouth feel, as well as it could cause astringency as well. If you have too much alkaline and acidity, and there's an imbalance and astringency there. Or if you have too much bitter, which creates kind of a harshness to a cigar or the beverage. And then we talk secondary about the olfactory system and what's called retroolfaction, which is basically introducing the olfactory nerves to the flavor components or the particles in the sense of smell, to then send a combination of both signals to the brain, allowing the brain to use recall or memory of flavor to be able to decipher both signals to then determine what it is that you're tasting. So it's a very complex anatomical response that we're getting every time we taste something, and it becomes even more complex when we're pairing products. So what that breaks down to is that in a bourbon like this 10-year-old Russell's Reserve, that's halfway empty, this is going to have a lot more oak tannin, because in bourbon they have to use new fresh oak barrels. The oak tannin, which is acid, gets introduced to the whiskey, and that creates a little bit of a bite to it if you pair it with a cigar that might have a little bit more of a leather and bitter notes, which then creates harshness on the back of the palate. Whereas a cognac like this VSOP, this is a little bit of a younger cognac than the Louis XIII, for example. And this cognac is going to have a little bit more of a tannin because of the skins of the grapes. And so it's going to retain tannin. Now, on cognac, they use Limousin French oak and they reuse barrels. So you're not going to get a lot of tannin from the oak itself, but you will get some tannin introduced from the skins of the grapes used to produce this cognac. And so here you're going to have a little bit of acidity as well. So we want to take that into consideration. So pairing these acidic products with a cigar that's going to have a little bit more of oils to give you some umami or some coating on the palate, that's going to help create balance of flavors. From there, then we look at the different individual flavor components or perceived flavor that we're going to get. For example, the grape flavors, a little bit of sweetness and things like that. Now, from there, we have an aged product like this Louis XIII cognac, where the youngest cognac here is going to be 40 years old, and the average age is 100 years old, and it's said that there's up to 200-year-old cognac in this bottle. So that's going to have a lot more of that oaky flavor, a lot more warmness to the flavor profile. And as I mentioned, they reuse the barrels, so there's less tannin going to be present. So that's going to be a really nice, smooth cognac. And so now we want a cigar that's not going to introduce harshness, introduce bitter, or have any bite to it. So you want to have a nice, smooth, mellow cigar with some warm flavor profiles, maybe a little bit of a chocolatiness to it. So when we look at flavor and and pairing, we're talking about the palate primarily, and how it interacts and creates a tactile experience, how it creates the different activation of the various 5 flavors, and then from there we look at how we refine that into the retro olfaction, or the sense of smell, and how we introduce different refined components compared to our experiences and our historical references, and how we define flavors. So, as I said before in our previous video, the best experience you can get is by tasting multiple things, trying different pairings, identifying what works for your palate, and then from there you can then replicate experiences, or be able to understand how one thing interacts with the other, and then you can kind of play with similar products. Again, this is Tomas, your tobacconist here at Ultimo Premium Cigars. If you have any questions or comments, please drop it in the comment section below. Like and subscribe. Check out all of our other socials at Ultimo Cigars. And as always, I thank you for all your support. We'll see you again soon.